Hello there, welcome to another RHLSTP. This week we have the wonderful David Morrissey. He is the governor and has done lots of other stuff as well. But that's mainly what I'm interested in, as you'll see. Look, we're coming on tour. Go to richherring.com. You can find out all the dates. It's in the gig guide. There's also a special tour page, RHLSTP. And you can find out where we're coming. Why not come and see us? It'd be lovely if you do. You can also find more about the podcast at rhlstp.co.uk. And how you can contribute if you don't want to come along and see it live. Thanks for watching. Let's sit back, relax, and then not relax, because we got to be attentive and listen properly to RHLSTP. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Leicester Square Theatre. It's been a week since the last one, and Richard Herring has not lost any weight at all. Please welcome Richard Herring. Hello. Love to see you all again. What you said is welcome to Richard Herring's Local Standard Time podcast. Whatever time you're listening to it, it's local standard time. That's the guarantee. Wherever you are, it's local standard time right now, and that's our new gimmick. Though I was talking to why have I written them in all different places in the book? I was looking at pornographic versions of the astrology signs in the window of a video shop with my French exchange student, Nicolas, he's called. He calls it RHLSTP, so I don't know if that's going to catch on, so at least I did that right. Let's have a look and see who's here today, if there's anyone new here. I don't know if we've seen you before in the centre. Have we seen you before, sir? First time you come and you're sat front and centre. What's your name, sir? James. And what do you do for a living, James? Like work in IT?
No, I'm retired.
You're retired. What did you do? Worked in IT?
I was a lawyer.
You're a lawyer, but that's like being working in IT of the olden days when you were they didn't have IT back then, so you had to get a proper job. And who's this young man with you?
My son.
Oh, it's just that's all right. Then that's okay. I mean, you went like that as if, yeah, I'm not really his son. That's the story we've come up with. We're not filming you. It's fine. You look a little bit like Ian Morris, the co-creator of The Inbetweeners, but we'll let that pass. Your name was Eddie. You didn't say your name. And what do you do for a living, Eddie?
I'm a fundraiser.
You're a fundraiser? I mean, that's what everyone does, mate. That's the point of a job. Oh, you do it for other people. That's nice, but you get a little bit, don't you? You get a little bit off, don't you? Yeah, you get a little bit. What's the most funds you've ever raised in a day? Because I'll tell you what mine is, 150,000 fucking quid. What's yours?
I've just started. So
I've just started? It's my first day. They just show you how to work the fundraiser machines. I haven't... Don't let you raise... Who are you raising funds for? The Nazi party? What? God. It is hard, yeah. So good luck with that difficult job. Getting easier though, isn't it? So it's going to turn out to be getting a lot easier. It's a much easier sell. It's lovely to meet you. Is it your first time here, Eddie? Yeah, because I would have met you before. What did you do before you were a fundraiser, Eddie?
I was a student.
Were you a student of fundraising?
Yes.
Yeah, yes! From your dad. It's good. It's nice that two generations can come and enjoy the show together. Maybe you could have a son as well and bring him along. Yeah. Well, all three of you can sit there. If you don't fancy chances, there's a lady there. That's how it works. Believe me, I didn't know till mine turned up. 4 years. My daughter wanted, when she was 3, we made her a rabbit cake. That's what she said she wanted until the day of her party. And we got to the party. She said, I want Spider-Man and Elsa cake. So she had a rabbit cake, so she was disappointed. But she still wanted a Spider-Man and Elsa cake a year later, and she got it. With Elsa on the top from Frozen. Don't need to tell you, Eddie, you know what I'm talking about. And
It's good when just some of the older people go, I don't know what that is, and then we go, Gus Sullivan, oh, that's fine. Anyway, she got it. She's fine. Right, let's move on. I think I rocked that. It was all ad-libbed. You wouldn't believe it, would you? Tightly scripted. So, my guest this week is probably best known for his role. This was really difficult because everything he's done is really good. Except one thing which I want to talk to him about later. He's probably best known for playing Little John in the wrong 1991 film of Robin Hood. Will you please welcome David Morrissey, ladies and gentlemen? David Morrissey! Welcome. Come in, sit down.
What was the right version of Robin Hood?
The Prince of Thieves was the right one.
Oh, I never watched that. Didn't that have an annoying song in it?
It did have that annoying song. Yeah. That's what you needed. Just needed an annoying. You tried.
I was in the version with Uma Thurman. I think that was a good choice on my part.
That was pretty good. But did Little John get to get off with Uma Thurman?
Not saying.
Well, if he did, I'm watching that. Was it? Yeah. I'd like to. I have watched some versions of
Little John Thomas.
So there's lots I want to talk to you about, and there's so much stuff that is unbelievable. But mainly I got you on because I loved you being the governor in The Walking Dead. So that is
okay.
why.
Good.
Which it's. He was a baddie. You're allowed to. He was. We used to sit and watch The Walking Dead going boo every time. Boo.
Quite right.
It's a phenomenal job of acting that. I think I've gone off The Walking Dead recently because you're not in it.
Right. Okay.
And they're too stupid.
Who are?
All the people, they've had zombies for ages and they keep going, oh, let's go out of the stock and go and split up and walk around. Yeah, remember what happened last time now? We got tied to things and people got hit with baseball bats. Oh, yeah, it probably won't happen this time. Oh, it happened again. But it was such a...
I was in season 3 and season 4.
Yeah, I mean, it was such an intense and amazing character.
Yeah, it's brilliant, yeah. And I love doing it. I mean, I sort of... I was in LA anyway because my best friend is an actor called Ian Hart. And he's a great guy. And he was over there. He was living over there. And I went to visit him. And whilst I was there, I got a manager. I didn't have a manager before. And I got this manager, and he said, do you fancy going off for The Walking Dead? And I knew The Walking Dead because Andrew Lincoln and Lenny James were both friends of mine, and I'd watched it, and I'd liked it. I thought it was great. But the way these things work, you don't know what character you're going up for. You know, they don't. There's so much secrecy around it. So, of course, what I did was go to the local bookshop, read up to where they are in the TV series, and think, well, who's the next big character? You know, and that was the governor.
Yeah.
So I sort of knew that's what the thing was. But the governor in the comics or the graphic novels is real badass straight off. You know, he's horrible. He's just really, you know. So I was thinking, okay, you know, I know this is a big role, but he doesn't last that long either. But when I met the new showrunner, Glenn Mazzara, he said they wanted to do something different with it, and they really did. They started him in his journey much earlier. You know, they started him with 2 eyes rather than 1.
Yes.
And you know, and you don't know where you are with him. You think he's what he presenting to people is very different to who he is.
Yeah. Well, that's what is very, you know, it was gripping and terrifying. Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of. Just from that role, you're sort of I've met you before, but like before I met you, I thought I'm slightly terrified to meet you because of that role, which you must get a lot.
Yeah, it's quite handy. I mean, you know, it's quite handy when people come up to you and you think, well, you just have to turn a look on them and they go, oh, well, sorry. But I love the show. I mean, I'm a big, you know, the great thing about being in The Walking Dead is it does have a massive fan base.
Yeah.
And I also was in Doctor Who for one episode. It's very similar in the fact that the fans really take the ownership of the show. They take the show seriously. They take the characters seriously. And I love that. And the interaction I have with the fans. And I do Comic-Cons and stuff like that. I mean, that's the real pleasure for me, is there's a sense that you get to meet the fans of the show who are very vocal and care very much, and that's I find that really exciting.
Yeah. It was, so you were joining it and it had already established as one of the biggest shows in the world, and then so were you sort of prepared for that?
Well, actually, I mean, this isn't me blowing my own trumpet, but it hadn't really got to that point. It'd done 2 seasons.
Right.
And it was a sleeping hit, people liked it and stuff. The 3rd season and the 4th season, it's suddenly, not because I was in it, but the stories changed, and they really did it became the biggest show in the world then.
Yeah, okay.
And I remember it was interesting, someone booing me, because they every season they show the trailer of what's coming next at San Diego Comic-Con. And the first season I was at San Diego Comic-Con, my character hasn't come on, nobody knows who I am, and they introduce everybody, and there's about 10,000 people in the audience. And you walk on and they say, ladies and gentlemen, Norman Reedus, and the crowd go absolutely berserk, and then they say, Andrew Lincoln, berserk, and go down the line, Stephen Yeun, everybody. Get to me, nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I walk in and I think, because no one has seen me. And then the next year, I get there, Andrew Lincoln, just everyone's screaming, Norman Reedus. I come on, 10,000 people boo me. And I've never been more pleased in my life. It was great. And I went to the front, I was like, and it was great. And suddenly I thought, oh, they like it, Yeah. It's a great show to do in the sense that it's a really well-run show as well. You see the actors, but backstage, what goes into that show. I mean, it's something like, I think it's like about $7 to $8 million an episode.
Yeah.
So they're like mini films. You're making mini films, except you're shooting it in 8 days.
Right.
So it's crazy. But the camaraderie is brilliant. I mean, everyone dies on I do think they brought me onto The Walking Dead to get rid of the wage bill. Because I killed so many people. I was like known as Mr. P45, really. But what happens is that you have 8 days to shoot it, but on day 4, the episode comes in for the next episode. And it's there at lunchtime. So you go into your trailer and it's there. And of course, like any actor, you read it backwards. So you turn it upside down and think, am I still in it? And you get to your name and you're still alive. You think, oh, great. So then you turn it over and you read it properly. And then when you read it properly, someone will die. And it's usually me who's killed them. Yes. Or it was in season 3. And you think, oh, gosh. And then you open the door to the trailer and everybody sort of comes out at the same time, except one door is closed. And that person is phoning their agents and their manager saying, well, I'm off next week. I'm going to go. And it's really hard.
Yeah. Well, it's an unusual show that's what was the exciting thing about it, was there wasn't...
No,
even with Andrew Lincoln, you kind of think he could go. And
and it wasn't like Star Trek. It wasn't like there was 5 guys and one was just in a red shirt, and you knew he wasn't longer. He wasn't going to last long. It was always, you never knew who was going to go.
No.
And there was practical reasons for that, and that's the secrecy happened then. Yeah. We used to have these old things where whenever anybody died, we'd all go out for a meal, during the week to say goodbye and everything. And we had to stop doing that because whenever more than 4 or 5 of us just went out, there were all these rumors went out that one of us was going to die. And it's like, no. So then you couldn't go anywhere. That was wild. So then we used to just have them in people's houses and stuff.
Right. And does the fandom ever got like weird or scary?
I had a Beatles moment, which was just fantastic. We were in San Diego, and it was a launch of the show, and they had the Walking Dead party. And we went, and everyone's dressed as zombies, and it's great, it's fantastic. And I needed to go because I was flying back to the UK the next day. And I said to the girl who was looking after us, I need to go now. She said, okay, we'll get you out the other entrance. And she said, she was on the phone, she said, your limo's here, let me take you out. And she got me through the other entrance and just left me out. And I walked out, and I was on the street, and I thought, my car's not here. And then I saw my car at the other entrance down there, and in between was about 5,000 Walking Dead fans. And I turned around, one guy turned and saw me, and they all just started running towards me. And I was signing stuff, and my driver saw me, and he was going, come on. So then I had to get through that, and then they all ran after me.
Yeah.
And I jumped into this limo, closed the door, and they were banging on the limo, and people were on it, and they're driving off. And he said, I'm sorry about that, sir. And I said, that was fantastic. I loved it. It was great. It was like, that Beatles moment. It felt great, but it's never got weird for me. I mean, people are very polite. 9 times out of 10, people are so polite, and it does help that you play someone who's a complete arsehole, and a killer and stuff like that. That's handy. I mean, Andy gets a lot of stuff which people just want to hug him a lot, but no, people are very respectful.
And you're renowned for your meticulous research and inhabiting a role. How do you research being a man in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, apart from having lots of fans run at you?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what I did do, and I am a bit of a geek when it comes to all these things. So what I did was I did a lot of reading about the Black Plague.
Right.
So it was all about Europe, in the, I think it was the 1400s or whatever, and about how the plague affected society, how people at the top echelons of our society were dying out. So people who had no experience had to start taking control of stuff, and how the people built walls around their cities, not only to keep people out, but to keep people in. So they didn't want the infection going in and out.
Yeah.
So all of that then. I did a lot of research on, there's a book called The 47 Principles of Power or something, which is really tough. I read a lot about dictatorships.
Yeah.
And then accent-wise, I listened to Bill Clinton's audio book, which was quite... I mean, he's from Arkansas and we're set in sort of Georgia, but, so what? So, I got around that a bit. But, but that was the accent stuff.
Yeah.
And then, so there's stuff like that you're doing as well.
Yeah, it's because not all actors are that meticulous.
Right, have you got examples?
Well, me. When I do acting, I don't work that hard. Reading stuff, no. But I don't get many jobs.
Maybe those two things go hand in hand. You want to check
I'm always
that out.
cast as perverts and stuff. So
well,
I don't know
I think you've done a lot of research on that.
Maybe. Just live it.
Your computer history would differ.
No, well, you do mention we'll talk about Doctor Who briefly as you mentioned that, which you sort of played the Doctor, and there was those rumours you were going to be the Doctor.
Yeah, there was this really weird thing. So I did the Christmas special, so of course we filmed it in February, and so we were putting false snow everywhere, and it was called The Next Doctor, and it was about a guy who thought he was Doctor Who. He'd been sort of attacked by the Cybermen, and he had this fugue thing gone on his head, and he sort of picked up some data from the Cybermen about Doctor Who, and he wants to be Doctor Who. And then David Tennant as his Doctor Who, as the real Doctor, comes down, and they sort of interact. And after we finished it, I got a call from Russell T Davies, who said, listen, David's leaving. Nobody knows, but he's leaving. Your episode's called The Next Doctor, so there'll probably be some rumours going around that you're the next Doctor. Please don't tell anyone it's not you. And I said, oh, okay. I said, but I can tell my kids. And he went, no. He said, you live in North London. One of your kids obviously knows somebody who works for a newspaper or something like that. They'll go out. So they couldn't tell. So for months and months, the rumour was coming out. And my kids were like, are we moving to Cardiff? And I was like, I can't tell you. Do your homework, I might tell you. And so they had to deal with this thing. And then I got a little insight into what it was like. People were camping outside my house, taking photographs and stuff. And then it didn't happen, because I knew it wasn't going to happen, So it was no surprise to me. Tuning in and going, hang on a minute, it's Matt Smith. No, so, but no, I knew it wasn't going to be me. But I loved doing it.
Yeah.
Because it was one of the few things for me that I did that my children could watch. Because I'd done so many things where I'm either killing people or, in bed with them or both sometimes. Yeah. And, so it was sort of the one thing one of the few things I've done where my kids could actually tune in, you know. So it was great for me. And their friends could tune in, It was the time that my kids realized I was an actor. That's why you leave the house. So no, that was great.
Would you fancy it though if it came up again and you offered that role? Would that be one you wanted to do?
Yeah, I think it's in good hands. I think Jodie's fantastic, but I love the show. I'd love to be back in the show in some way. I think and I think Chris Chibnall, who's writing it now, I think I'm looking forward to what he does next and stuff in the next season. So yeah, I tune in every now and again. I really like it. So I'm open to offers.
So you played Gordon Brown alongside Michael Caine, who was meant to be a guest on this show, but at least you turned up, so that's something.
Well, I only live around the corner.
He was in New York, to be fair.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a difficult commute.
He played Tony Blair, yeah.
Yeah, you were Tony Blair in the original one. There was a
It's
few
called
of
The
those.
Deal.
The Deal,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was Peter Morgan, and it was all about the formation of New Labour.
Yeah.
And how there was a pact made, or supposedly a pact made, between Gordon Brown and Tony Blair about who would be the next leader. And everybody felt that Gordon Brown would be that leader at that time. And I think Tony Blair had sort of urged him to be the leader before then.
Yeah.
But John Smith was the natural successor. And when John Smith died, sadly, then Gordon just presumed he would become the leader, and Tony sort of went in there.
Right.
And it was about the deal that they'd made between each other, that Tony would be leader for a while, and then Gordon would come up, and then, you know, we all know what happened after that.
Yeah. So he wouldn't, well, did you try to talk to Gordon Brown about
I did try.
Yeah.
I was surprised I wasn't arrested, actually, because I sort of went and sat in my car outside his house in Kirkcaldy and stuff. And I did stalk him for a while. And I watched a lot of his stuff, and then I went to his father was a minister in Scotland, and I went to his church and I looked at that, and you know, and there's lots of books about Gordon, but I did a lot of research on him, and I liked him actually, and you know, I liked his politics a lot, and I admired him, and also I thought he was that character that was. Privately was one personality. You know, everybody would talk about what he was like privately, that he was funny, and I was like, funny? yeah, he was a raconteur, he was very funny, he told jokes, and I was like, that's not the guy I'm watching. It's not the guy I see on the TV. And so I had to talk to a lot of his friends about what he was like outside of the public arena, and very different. And also very volatile. You know, there's stories of him just grabbing people and pushing them up against the wall. But also I found it fascinating that he was a man who, the Scottish education system did this thing when he was at school where they advanced people by a year if they were clever. But he was so clever that had already happened to him. So he was advanced by 2 years.
Right.
So he was arriving at Edinburgh University at 16, and they knew he was coming. You know, they were waiting for him because he was this legend, academic legend around Scotland. And just before he arrived in this place where, you know, the hallowed halls of Edinburgh University, he played rugby in this old pupils teachers game, and he got banged in the head and his retinas went. And he started losing his sight. So he's just about to arrive at this place where he's already a star. And he, you know, this is a long time ago, he has to lie in this darkened room for hours on end. And he was a voracious reader, so he couldn't read anymore because he was having these very painful eye operations. And it's sort of that man in a hurry came from that place.
Yeah.
That, you know, not just his academic education, but his emotional education was stopped at that point, really cruelly, I think. And from then on, he was a man in a hurry. He really wanted to sort of get on, and but it had been taken away from him at that time, I think.
Right. That's yes, I didn't know that about him. That's very interesting. But you played you did follow Peter Mandelson around. That was for a different
yeah.
place.
So Peter Mandelson was very kind to me because I was doing a thing called State of Play. And a friend of mine knew him a bit, and I sort of said, listen, would he meet me? And he said yes. And I got a message back saying he'd meet me for 15 minutes at Portcullis House. Your bottle's just about to go there. Oh. And dropped your bottle. And well done, sir.
Thank you.
And so I met him for 15 minutes. At the end of 15 minutes, he said, do you want to, you know, I think he trusted me. And I spent the day with him in the house then. And just seeing how politicians, he wasn't the only person I met at that time. I met quite a few other politicians. And just seeing how politicians worked in the House from their constituencies. For State of Play was a different job. It was about a man, a young politician who was on the rise. He was from the north of England, coming down to London, and he was a star. And he does something in order to get to the top level, and it all goes wrong for him. His ambition gets the best of him. And all I wanted from politicians was none of their ideology. I just wanted to know what their job was. And Peter was very good at just telling me what the job was. And the other politicians I met as well, about being on committees, about having an office, you know, a constituency, having, you know, going up there, spending your time in there, coming to Westminster. And I got a lot of, I'm like everybody else, I want our politicians to do a better job. But I got a real inkling about what the job was for them.
Yeah.
And how difficult it was, and the surgeries and stuff like that, and how they do that. I mean, that's a part of us part of politicians that we don't see and understand a lot of the time.
Well, I think that especially Gordon Brown and Peter Mandelson certainly get a very hard time, and Blair get a very hard time in retrospect. And
and they probably deserve to as well.
Yeah.
I don't want them all. My thing with politicians is I think they should do their job rather than appear on Have I Got News for You and stuff like that. I don't want them to tell me jokes. I don't want them to be personalities. I don't want them to I just want them to do their job.
Yeah.
And, some of them have, they've buggered it up a bit. But, I think there is a sense of them, the job they do, some of them do a really good job doing small stuff.
Yeah.
But they're all out to make it, that thing of... what they say is politics is entertainment for ugly people. And I think it's, that's sort of, once they brought cameras into the parliament, that all went out. They all started having their hair done and everything else, wearing makeup and stuff. But I really got a lot more respect for them when I started working on them and seeing what they had to do.
Now, let's go back to the beginning. Your dad was a cobbler.
Yeah.
Did he ever have...
Why is that funny?
They're ahead of me, don't worry, this is the thing. Did he ever have a magic machine, that if you ever made shoes on, you could then put on the shoes and become the person who wore the shoes?
No, he didn't have one of
No,
them.
okay.
No.
Have you seen The Cobbler by Adam Sandler?
I haven't seen The Cobbler by Adam Sandler.
You must watch it.
Is that it?
Yeah, in The Cobbler, Adam Sandler's dad's a cobbler.
I'm not up on my Adam Sandler.
Yeah, well, you've got to watch it. You've got to watch Adam Sandler. You might get into an Adam Sandler film. I mean, that's the holy grail.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping
Have
for.
you been in an Adam Sandler
I haven't. He does lots of perverts and stuff in those.
He's looking for a pervert, I hear.
He's an English pervert. I'm not racist or homophobic enough to be in one of his films. Yeah,
so tell me about the cobbler.
So his dad's a cobbler, then his dad dies, and then he goes and finds this old cobbling machine. And I'm sure your dad had some cobbling machines.
He had a lot. Yeah.
And he makes some shoes on it.
Yeah.
And then he put on the shoes, and they fitted him, and then he turns into the person who he becomes the person whoever.
Wow.
I just wondered if that happened to all cobblers, or if that was just Adam Sandler.
I did. Well, maybe it's an American cobbler thing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what Daniel Day-Lewis was doing on his on his sabbatical, where he became a cobbler. He was making Lincoln shoes and then putting them on, and that was it.
That was how he used to do it.
Maybe I'm missing a chick.
That's cheating and acting, isn't it? You do all the research and
well, Beryl Reid always said once she got the shoes, she got the character.
Yeah, there you go.
That was it. So maybe that's where we go with that. Maybe Adam Sandler heard that quote by Beryl Reid and thought there's a movie in this.
It's a great film. I'll buy the DVD and send it to you.
No.
I think you'll get a lot. I think you'll get a lot out of it.
Don't bother, is my thing.
Talking of bad films,
I wonder what's coming up.
I haven't seen Basic Instinct 2.
What do you mean?
I saw Basic Instinct 1, Basic Instinct,
Yeah.
but I didn't see Basic Instinct 2.
Well, you haven't lived, is all
I've
I'm
seen the
saying.
trailer to Basic Instinct 2, so it came along a little time after Basic Instinct.
Well, yes, a couple of years after.
Was it only a couple of years?
It was about 10 years,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think, yeah.
Yeah. And so it was a big break for you. Obviously, you're the main male role of
It was a
alongside
massive
Sharon
break.
Stone.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was one of those ones where they flew me to LA, and I met Sharon in we had a read through on camera. I got on the plane. I came home, and when I got off the plane at Heathrow, the phone call was there to say I got the part. I was delighted. Yeah.
Yeah. But you don't know. The thing as an actor, you don't know how things are going to turn out, and it feels to me like.
No, and God, you never want to.
But the reviews were horrible.
Reviews were absolutely
And
killing.
very horrible
yeah.
about you.
Massively. In America,
Let me see if I can find it. There was just one thing that the Washington Post said. I just thought, that's out of order.
Really?
They wouldn't have done that if
Well,
you...
why don't you quote it now?
I think they said you...
Yeah, can I ask, did they spell my name with 2 R's and 2 S's? Because that's all I care about.
I'm not sure. They called you a sad sack.
A sad sack.
Yeah, that's not very nice. That's
You sure that was my whole body, or just because there was a lot of nakedness in there? There was a lot of nudity in Basic Instinct 2, so maybe that was just a specific part of my body they were talking about. Rather than the whole
Perky
character.
penis.
He's got a sad sack and a perky penis. You know, in some scenes. In others, not so perky. I did spend a lot of my time naked in that film. It was so weird, because they sent me to a personal trainer for months in America, and that was great. I loved that. It was like training all the time. It was great. And I've told this story before, but at the end, when we went to the screening, I was with my wife, and there's this scene where I come down this stairs in Sharon's house, and I'm just wearing a towel. Like that, you know, doing a movement. And I'm in the kitchen, and I have to open this fridge and take out something in the closed fridge. And in the screening, my wife, who's not seen the film at all, this is the first time she's seeing it, she turns around to me, she goes, "Oh, we should get a fridge like that." I'm like, excuse me? It's so weird. And I spend most of my time, I suppose most of my time on that film just walking around naked. You know, I mean, I had flip-flops on. You know, I'm not that much of an exhibitionist.
Did you get the fridge?
No, we never got the fridge. No,
Did you get the fridge?
No, it was a very specialised fridge. They only make them in America. And after that, I was like, no, you can have one of those little ones with the beers in.
Yeah.
But it was like my first time I had a sex scene on that film. The costume girl said to me, "Would you like a sock?" And I was like, "What do you mean, a sock?" And she said, "You know, to wear on your pants." And I was like, I've never done one of these scenes before. I don't know what a sock is. And she said, "Well, it's something you put your cock and balls in, you know. It's a modesty pouch," she said. And I was like, "That sounds ridiculous." So she took me into the costume trailer, and she had 3 on the thing of various sizes. And I was like, "Look, I don't know whether I want to wear a sock." And then she went, "Well, just want you to know, Kevin Bacon wore this in the last film I was in." And I was like, "Oh, so, you know, maybe that's your 5 degrees of separation to Kevin Bacon."
That's a new level.
I've had my cock in his sock. But anyway, I didn't wear it. I couldn't wear it. I put it on and thought I looked completely daft. It was like my trunks had shrunk. I was like, no. So I just didn't wear anything. And I quite liked it. It was great.
How did Sharon Stone feel about you being...
She was fine about it, because she was naked as well.
Okay.
You know, so it's so weird. I think some of the crew found it a bit weird. But you do weird things. There was one scene we had where it was quite weird. You've not seen it. And I presume most of you haven't seen it. But there was one scene where it's quite a strange film. There's one thing where we're having sex, and as we're having sex, she gets this belt and she throws it around my neck, and she pulls this belt. And it's quite a tricky maneuver. You know, so we're doing the scene, and she can't get it around my neck. So I'm sort of pretending to make love to her, and I'm sort of at the same time, because it's supposed to take me by surprise, but because I want everything to go so well and to get out of there, I'm sort of trying to get my head around this thing. And eventually the director, who's this big, burly Scottish guy, is so annoyed. He says, "Sharon, get off there. And he gets on, he says, "Dear, get on top of me." So I get on top of him. So now I'm naked on top of this guy who's massive. And I'm sort of not doing anything like that, but I'm just sort of sitting there like that. And he goes, "What you do is you get that," and he goes, "Poof," and he goes, and he hits me in the head with the buckle. And my head goes, "Poof," and we have to stop filming for 2 weeks. So I'm like, "What'd you do at work today, Dad?" So it was quite a weird experience. And the worst, you read that review, and so then you have to promote the film. I went to America, and I'm in this little rented place, and I know the film stinks, and I know everybody thinks it stinks. And suddenly, you know, I'm on my own. Everybody else who was my mate about, 5 months ago, suddenly, hello, they're not there anymore. And I was watching this TV show, and this guy said, "So the film's out this weekend, Basic Instinct 2, starring Sharon Stone and David Morrissey. And if you know who David Morrissey is, you're probably David Morrissey." And I was like, "Yes, I am!" I said, fucking hell. So then you have to do all the talk shows, and everybody hates it, and everyone's taking the piss out of it. So, and you're not allowed to join in with taking the piss out of it.
No.
Because you've got to be, that's against contract. Or all you want to say is, look, do you want to see my house I bought? That's what you want to say. But you sort of got to sit there and you got to do all that. So it's tough. Really.
There was an element of it because you weren't known, I think, in America.
In America, I wasn't known. Nobody knew who
So
I
there
was.
was an element-
So I took it. And also, I'm a huge fan of the first film.
Yeah.
First film was a great film. And actually, this script was a great film, but it was one of the great script. But in production, it just went, it just went crazy. And you realize that there's a lot of money in this film. And it doesn't matter what the film's like to the end of it. It's just it's a check that hasn't been cashed, and it's going to be cashed.
Yeah.
But you're there to do your job. You want to do the best job you can, so you're on it. But it was quite sobering up. I mean, I did feel very low at the end of it, but then, by that time I'd done 3 jobs in between.
Was there a point, I read that there was a point you were thinking about you wanted to give up acting at that point?
Yeah, I mean,
But that's because you were a very successful actor by that point, so it's only one job.
It was a bit of an overreaction. But, for me, I grew up watching movies.
Yeah.
I wanted to do movies. And I grew up watching American movies. That's what I wanted to do. And this was my first American movie. And it was a movie, it was a franchise, it was a movie from something that I thought was really good. And not only was the movie not good, but the experience was not good. It was I was suddenly working with people who, they weren't my people. It didn't feel like my people. And the real difference for me is when you do independent film or television, you've got to be going. It's a fast-paced scenario on a day, and I like that. There's something about it that I like. On this, because there was so much money, you would do days and days where the camera didn't turn over.
Right.
Or you do days where you do the same 2 lines for like 400 times. And I was going crazy. I was like, I want to just move. I want to go.
Sure.
I want to, I want to feel it and do the best job. I don't want to move on until I felt I've got it. But likewise, I don't want to do 400 takes. That's crazy.
But that's the weird thing about acting as a job, is that it's a very repetitive job. So if you're in a play, you're doing the same thing every night.
Yeah, you are. But I mean, you find different things in it. It's very different to that sense of those big movies where you're then doing the same line so many times. Then your energy goes. Whereas I know it does sound like it's repetitive if you're doing a job for 6 months, but actually, because of the live audience, there's always something different.
Yeah. Look at this, like this lot, isn't it? So you grew up in Liverpool, and you were friends with. You met quite a lot of the big Liverpool actors as you went. You met you're friends with all the McGanns.
I am, yeah.
Do you have a system to tell which is which?
Yeah. I was once with I love the McGanns, but when I first met them, I met them for a drink in London, and we went to the Arts Club, I think, and it was great. And we all got very drunk, and they started singing,
Right.
and they do this brilliant 4-part harmony. I think they were in a show called Yakety Yak at the time, so they just were singing, and I can't sing, so I'm sitting there, and everybody in the club is looking at us, and I'm in there again. And they were just wonderful. But Paul McGann particularly has been very kind to me and was really kind to me in my career. Yeah. And their mum is just the most wonderful woman. And when I went to RADA, because I know you had Rob Brydon on, and he said him and Steve had auditioned for RADA and not got in.
Yeah.
I got in. But I hated it for the first my first term. I hated it, and I got back and I was very low. I hated London, actually. I found London very difficult.
Yeah.
And I met Paul's mum and I told her about it, and she really just said, stick it out. She really told me that Paul had gone through the whole same thing, and she really encouraged me to go back to London and stick it out, and I'm so glad she did. Really.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is, I know this is a question you get asked a lot, but it feels now that, working class people can't get into acting in the way that they could, generation ago, and your generation as well. I mean, the generation before you, we had Albert Finney's just died recently.
Yeah, he was a very important person to me to look at because, he was a working class man who'd done, very, very well. And not only well in, as a working class actor, but also done, reached the heights playing Hamlet and Macbeth and all those great roles. He'd done all the great Shakespearean roles. And so he showed me that it was achievable. Him and many others, people like Tom Courtenay and stuff like that. But my big bugbear is about education. I do a lot of stuff in schools where I talk to people to pupils about how to get into acting and to not close their ambition on acting or the arts in general. The great thing for me about coming from Liverpool was it was a city that took the arts seriously. It always has. The only reason I stood out amongst my friends for wanting to be an actor was that I didn't want to be in a band. Because all my mates were musicians. They wanted to be in a band, or they knew everything about music. But they didn't look down on me or take the piss out of me because I wanted to be an actor. No. It was really seen, and they had great theatres there, and so that was good. But now when I go to schools, the arts are really, I hate this term that we've brought in, which is soft options. That, music, art, drama, they're seen as soft options because the school aren't getting the points they need for the exam. Yeah. So it's not about creating empathetic people or, well-rounded people or people who... Because it's, not everybody's going to become an artist or a musician, but the appreciation that you have for those art forms is really important. They're the audiences of tomorrow. And the great thing about, the really important thing creatively is you have to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, a bit like Adam Sandler. But you have to,
Not so literary. He's a very literal. Very literal.
I don't know whether that's the message of the cobbler. But you have to imagine what it's like to be someone else.
Yeah.
And the more you take that out of education and the more you want education, obviously maths and English are really important, but the more you take it out of education, the less communicative you become as people. And I find it drives me mad, particularly in state education. It's really hard for schools in the state system to deliver that to their pupils. Whereas obviously in the private sector, it's there in abundance.
Yeah, well, they've got
and that's, I think, is reflected on our screens and on our stage.
But also, someone who comes from a wealthy family can come to London for a couple of years and not get any work and still survive, whereas...
They can come into the profession, which is notoriously hard, and they can make a name for themselves because they can go through that periods of unemployment, which everybody else has. So, ipso facto, it becomes a middle-class profession. A bit like journalism or whatever. It's not the only profession that's doing that. A bit, sometimes a bit like politics. But, that's what we're creating, I think.
Yeah. It's bad, isn't it? That's what Adam Sandler says at the end of the comedy.
Is that what he
goes? He just does a big speech.
Maybe
like
if
that.
I do the cobbler too.
Yeah.
Which is...
People will be very upset.
Which will be me and me flip-flops.
Could you do it with the sock?
I could do it with... I can have Adam Sandler's shoes and Kevin Bacon's sock. That's a movie I'm going to be in next.
And you lived in White City. I lived in Shepherd's Bush for a long time. I just moved out of Shepherd's Bush.
I lived in the White City estate, and there was a pub called the Springbok, which we used to go to, and then another pub called the General Smuts. Because it was all about the South African, it was built for the, I lived on South Africa Road, Canada Way, South Africa Road, all around there.
Bloemfontein Road.
Bloemfontein Road, yeah. It's because it was built for the Commonwealth Games, all that estate. And I lived there for a while, and it was tough. It was tough in the sense that, it was very urban and sort of, it was, I didn't have any money, and, I wasn't eating very well, and all that. So that was what was happening. But I was really thankful of being there. I love that part of London. In fact, QPR is my London team because it's right by where we were. So I used to go there. It was when this is how old I am. They had the AstroTurf then.
Yes.
So I used to, and literally you could just go up, pay, and get in. So I used to see a lot of football there. But I loved it around there, and it was sort of the Shepherd's Bush. The Bush Theatre was there as well, so I used to see a lot of theatre there, and that was a really important place for me.
Did you ever perform at the Bush Theatre?
I never did. No, I think it was because I lived so close. It was like I never performed at the Bush Theatre, and I never got a job for the BBC. And then when I moved away, I got a job for the BBC. So there was always that stuff. But no, I never worked.
It was quite rough in those days. White City especially was it?
Yeah, but there was a lot going on. I remember. There was a lot of good community stuff going
Yeah,
on
it
as well. It
still
was
is
rough,
that.
but it wasn't rough. It wasn't any rougher from where I came from.
That's true. Didn't want to say it myself. So.
Have you been up to where I come from?
I have, of course. I love.
Wait till you get back.
I've been there enough that I can do jokes about Liverpool. It takes a long time to go to Liverpool and be able to do jokes about Liverpool.
Yeah, you don't want to be opening with that. You know, when you get up there.
Well, I did a gig where I did a joke about Liverpool, got nothing, and then I said, Liverpool, best sense of humour in the world, and that got a laugh. So I can't remember what I said about them. It was something nice. And I didn't... God, there's so many things. And I was going to compare you to Albert Finney, in that with Albert Finney, when he died, I obviously knew he'd done loads of things, and I obviously knew he'd done these parts. But you so identified him, the parts with the character, that you forgot it was Albert Finney. I forgot he was Hercule Poirot. I just thought that's Hercule Poirot, more than Ustinov or anyone else who's done it. You picture him, and then you go, oh, fuck, that was Albert Finney.
Yeah.
And Annie and things like, he was
Aaron Brockovich. I mean, he's great in Aaron Brockovich. And
Yeah.
also he's in Tim Burton's film Big Fish, which I think he's great in.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful film that got slagged off, and it broke me up. I've seen it so many times, Billy Crudup and stuff, and it was a really great film. And I saw him on stage. He was in Orphans at the Hampstead Theatre, which is like this, it's not a big West End venue. He was, you'll get there one day. You've got to start somewhere. And but he was so close to me, and I was amazed. But he was brilliant, it was very important for me, as a working class man, to see him.
Yeah, but I think that you have, as an actor, you have that element, I think, where I think, aside from maybe those big blockbusting, The Walking Dead, you could walk down the street and people they'd have seen many of your things and wouldn't notice you, I think, because you inhabit the character so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. I think I don't want people to recognize me. I want them to see the character. It's harder now, I think, but, it's harder just with your body of work. But, I'm always looking to sort of change myself to sort of suit the role, I think. Yeah. Not externally so much, but internally.
Again, that's the thing that's changed with, and a lot of acting is just somebody does themselves, isn't it? A lot of the film roles and a lot of the TV roles seem to be someone doing doing a version of themselves.
There's two, which is no bad thing, I think. But there's two types of acting, I think, is when you read a character and you think, how can I make this character like me, or how can I make me like this character? That's the questions you have. But they're both successful. I mean, and they're both valid, I mean, one of the big things I had recently was another hero of mine was Michael Caine. Michael Caine is an actor who's not very similar in all his roles, but he's known for being Michael Caine, And I did a movie with him, and it's my only fanboy moment ever. And it was the first I'd met him. We'd done the read-through. We'd done some rehearsals. And the first scene I had was he's playing loud music in his room. I have to knock on the door. He opens the door, and I have to tell him off. And that's the scene. And we rehearse it a few times, and the director says, let's go for a take. Put the clapperboard on. And I stand outside this room, and I think, God, I wish my mum and dad were alive now to see me being in a scene with Michael Caine. If they'd known I've got to this place. Action! And I went... and I had nothing. My whole face just went buff. And I said, I'm so sorry, I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm... And we had to go again. And then later on I explained to him, he said, it's all right, it happens all the time. And I was like... but it was like seeing him in the flesh. Yeah. And because I used to watch those movies with my dad.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing, is actually as a man being an actor and sort of having to explain that to your parents, particularly your dad, that that's what you want to do. And this was at a time when, I guess, my father wasn't enlightened as he could have been. And he was worried about it. He was worried about the fact that it wasn't a job for life, but it was no job for a boy. It was no job for a man. And I was saying, but Dad, you watch John Wayne, you watch Michael Caine. He was like, they're not actors. What you're talking about is something different. And I was like, no, they're the guys you watch. They're film stars. They're not actors. And then you had to really work hard then to prove to him particularly, not to my mates so much, but to him. And sadly, he died before I had any success. But the sense that, this was a job for a man. And I still struggle with that. Not that it's a job for a man, but I also struggle with the fact that I think this is no job for an adult. It's really hard, and it is strange, but I do sit there and I think, like my dad was a cobbler, and his hands were like pieces of meat. It's like my little finger was his thumb, and his hand spanned from there. It was like his hands were massive and gnarled and black, and like his nails were just like lunar landscapes. And I've always been embarrassed about my hands, because there's like, you think, well, these aren't working hands. And it was really strange, that thing of for ages. And I still have a little flip about it, of looking at myself thinking, you know, I'll be putting my makeup on thinking, what am I doing, you know? And I've worked through that, but it still hijacks me sometimes about, and also I feel guilty because I love my job, you know, and it's that sense of, you know, if you do a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life, really. And I feel like that. I feel there's a charlatan inside there. And I think that's where that research stuff comes from, and the geeky side. I feel like I've got to work hard to earn this stuff, although I do like it, you know, it's not like a chore. But it's that sense of, is this a job? Is this a man's job? Am I working hard? It sort of trips me up every now and again about it.
Well, so we did a podcast together when we met with Sarah Milliken, which was an International Men's Day, which she usually has all women on a podcast, and she had all men on a podcast. And we got into quite interesting territory with that. Yeah. I mean, you are, you know, all that stuff's very sensitive, and you know, but you're still going back to that previous generation view of. Yes. You know, I mean, we're all probably just trying to please our dads in one way or another,
or get away from them. Yeah. You know, I mean, I think, you know, there's pleasing them, and there's also trying to get away from it. I mean, I had a very complicated relationship with my dad, and it's that sense of like, you know, the idea of, this sounds mad, but the idea that like I have a great relationship with my kids where I hug them a lot and I tell them I love them a lot, and they're like, that's all right, you know. And I say, I just want you to know I love you, because I never got that. So there's that sense of, you know, my dad was very sort of, I mean, he'd had a really awful time himself, I think, in his childhood. But he wasn't very, you know, affectionate in that way. It wasn't, you know, he didn't show great affection. And that, I struggle with that. But also then it comes into, for my job is about exploring human character. That's what it is. Yeah. And I'm very good at exploring human character externally for other characters. But when it comes to me, I'm like, I don't want to go there. And it's only the last couple of years, or certainly last 5 or 6 years, that I've started to turn that around and think, well, why do I do that? Why am I like that? And I think it's also to do with that debate about toxic masculinity. Yeah. About why am I like that? Why am I programmed like that? Why do I accept this? You know, why do I take that for granted? Those questions start to real filter into me now. Because it is about the change of behavior. I do think that, you know, I think men have a big problem. They are a big problem. Yeah. And in order to sort of change the way the world is, it's about looking at yourself and going, I'm the problem there. So how do I change that? I have to start changing that bigger picture by changing this. So there's all that stuff of digging it out. That's really tough, I think. Yeah.
That's what's very interesting about because I think it's easy it is easy to dismiss actors, and I think a lot of people do it, and some actors deserve to be
a lot of directors.
But I think I'm more a writer than of dramas and comedies and things like that, rather than an actor in them generally. But when you get good actors, you go, as a writer, you go, thank God for this. We've got someone who understands this. It's a very specific thing. I think you're kind of unusual in that you are like thoughtful. I mean, I
think there's lots of actors like that.
I don't want to offend actors. There's a lot of actors who are really brilliant, instinctive actors who, in a way, haven't. When you talk to them, you kind of go, okay.
But then there's that thing. A lot of the time, creative people have this thing of if it's not broke, don't fix it. If it's working, then why do I want to look into that? Don't look into that place because actually it's working anyway. So I don't want to examine it too much because the magic will go out the way. And I do understand that sometimes.
Yeah.
But, I think the older you get, the more you can't live off that. You have to start looking in those dark corners, really. But I don't, most of the actors I know are they're well-read, intelligent people. But the instinctive actors are interesting because if you're in a play for 6 months, your instincts can only take you so far. You get there in rehearsal, but after about a month or 2 months, you've got to start finding something else. And that's about just play, really. It's also that idea of failure, of the fear of failure. In a way, one of the things that I've started to do, and been doing this for a while, is the end product and the audience are slightly the least important thing for me. I like the process. The process is what makes it fun for me. So, I don't really watch myself on TV. I used to watch myself all the time because I had to watch myself because at first I was watch it and think, God, the size of my nose, or why did I have my hair cut like that, or why do I sound like that? And I had to watch it a few times before I started to watch it the way that everybody else was watching it, getting away from my vanity and my ego, and then I'd watch those things. But now I don't, because the film or the television thing at the end of the stage, it's slightly got nothing to do with me. The day I'm working and what I'm doing on that day with those people, that's all my responsibility. What they do with it afterwards is, fine, off you go. Sure. It's not my responsibility. A bit like reviews. I don't read reviews, not because I'm like, oh, I don't read reviews. It's like, they've got nothing to do with me. Yeah. They're not written for me. I've got to go and see the play. I read reviews because I think, shall I go and see this? If I'm in the play, I know I've got to go and see it because I'm in it. So there's no point me reading the review. So and the worst thing about reviews is when they say something good, particularly if you're in a play. Yeah. I love that moment when he kills it completely. So I don't read it for those reasons. But the process of doing it is the thing that's most important for me. What happens to it afterwards is, the worst thing for me as an actor was always the journey in the car at the end of the day from the studio home. I'd get in the car, I'd be knackered, I'd sit down, and then I'd go, why did I do that? I could have done that. That would have been good. And I'd had this debate with myself all the way home about how good the scene could have been than I've just done. Yeah. And actually, I had to stop that because that was madness. And now what I do is, on the day, I fight like hell to get the story I want to come across. And once I've done that, I have to let it go.
Yeah, it's very admirable. I think it's very, and you create histories for characters when it's not a real person. And so you create the backstory for all those people.
I do, yeah. I write a lot. I do a lot of writing before a job starts. If I've got the time, sometimes they say, "Can you start on Monday?" You think, "Oh, who's dropped out?" And that's fine, but it means I can't do as much. But if I have the chance, I'll write a long backstory, which nobody else gets to read. I just have it.
Yeah, but that work pays off, and I think it's a fascinating job, and being an actor is such an important job. Like you say, for your parents, those film stars were
totally. I never did cry the fact that it's entertainment. I mean, for me, I know when I first, and I've said this very often, is when I first saw Kes. Kes was the film that made me go, oh my goodness, they're telling stories about people like me. Before then, I'd really enjoyed, Coronation Street. I'd really enjoyed the Hollywood musicals. I'd really enjoyed big movies. But suddenly I'd watch a film and I'm like, that's my school. They're my teachers. And I was thinking about that, being an actor at that time, but when I watched Kes, it really troubled me. It really got me in the gut, what happened to this kid. It was like a documentary, and I knew it wasn't a documentary because his mum was in Coronation Street, so, I knew that. But it was sort of really upset me in a way that it happened to me or a friend of mine. And I think part of me becoming an actor was to try and find out what had happened to that kid. Because I wanted to know how they made that movie. How does Ken Loach make me feel like this? I want to find out. And then I want to pass it on. That's the other thing. Then I want to be in that world. And they were the things that really got me.
Cool. It's really interesting to talk to you. The one thing I wanted to say was you played the Scarecrow in Wizard of Oz when you were at school.
Yeah.
Peter Kay played the Lion in the
Maybe we could revive
Wizard
it.
of Oz. I was wondering if we could put together like an all-celebrity version of Wizard of Oz, but only with people who played the parts at school. So if you'd be
Right.
up for that,
Yeah.
watch out, Peter Kay. Though he doesn't come to all the rehearsals, and if he isn't at the rehearsal, he'll just dance around and steal focus from everyone, and then say he was the best. But apart from that, it's
Well, there's the voice of experience there, is there?
that's what he writes about in his autobiography. He didn't turn up for the day of rehearsal, and then he got annoyed that everyone else was doing their song, so he just danced up and down the aisles.
And stole it.
He stole it, and he was brilliant, apparently. That's what I read in his book. So, look, it's been really... I'm so glad you came on, and
Thank you
you're
very
much
much.
better than Michael Sheen because you turned up. Ladies and gentlemen, David Morrissey, to R2S's.
Thank you.
See you next week if you're coming. How'd you like them sky potatoes?